Imagine becoming the youngest champion in the history of the Wimbledon Championships at just 17 years old. The world calls you a genius. Millions of dollars start pouring in. Fame, luxury, and global admiration become your new reality. But decades later, that same champion would lose everything: his fortune, his reputation, and even his freedom. This is the unbelievable rise and fall of Boris Becker, and the dark truth about why success can sometimes destroy the very people it once made legendary. Phase 1. The Rise. Hope. Every legend begins with a dream, but sometimes that dream starts in the most ordinary places. In the small German town of Lyman, life was quiet and predictable. It wasn't a place known for producing global superstars. Yet inside a local tennis club, a young boy was unknowingly preparing to change the history of the sport. That boy was Boris Becker. Born in 1967, Becker grew up in a modest family. His father, Karl-Heinz Becker, worked as an architect and also helped build a local tennis center in their town. It was there that young Boris first encountered the sport that would shape his destiny. From the beginning, something about him stood out. Most children played tennis for fun. Boris played like he had something to prove. Coaches quickly noticed his explosive energy. He wasn't the most technically polished player at first, but he had something far more valuable: fearless aggression and relentless determination. He threw himself across the court for impossible shots. He dove for the ball with no hesitation. He played every match like it was the final of the world's biggest tournament. By the time he was a teenager, it was clear that Becker wasn't just another promising junior player. He had a rare combination of power, confidence, and mental toughness that intimidated opponents far older and more experienced than him. While most teenagers were worried about school exams and social life, Boris Becker was waking up early, training for hours, and dreaming about playing on the biggest stages in tennis. His coaches pushed him hard. The expectations grew, and slowly the world of professional tennis began to take notice. Then came the moment that would change everything. In 1985, Becker entered the most prestigious tournament in tennis, the Wimbledon Championships. Wimbledon wasn't just another competition, it was the sacred ground of tennis history, the tournament where legends were made. At that time, Becker was only 17 years old. He wasn't expected to win. He wasn't even expected to reach the final rounds. But what followed shocked the entire world. Match after match, Becker played with fearless intensity. His powerful serve and aggressive style overwhelmed seasoned professionals who had far more experience than him. Spectators couldn't believe what they were witnessing. A teenager, unknown to most of the world just weeks earlier, was defeating some of the biggest names in tennis on the sport's most iconic stage. Then came the final. The pressure inside the stadium was enormous. Millions of viewers around the world were watching as this young German faced the moment that could define his career. But Becker didn't look afraid. He played with the same courage that had carried him through the entire tournament. And when the final point was won, history was written. At just 17 years old, Boris Becker became the youngest champion in the history of the Wimbledon Championships at that time. The crowd erupted in celebration. Newspapers around the world ran the same headline: the new tennis prodigy had arrived. Germany celebrated him as a national hero. Sponsors rushed to sign him. The media couldn't get enough of the teenage sensation. Overnight, Boris Becker's life changed forever. He was no longer just a talented young athlete from a quiet German town. He was now a global superstar. But the sudden rise to fame came with something far more dangerous than pressure. It came with expectations. Because when success arrives too early and too fast, it doesn't just bring glory. It also plants the seeds of challenges that many young champions are not prepared to face. And for Boris Becker, the journey to the top had only just begun. Phase 2. The peak. Power. Success doesn't just change your life. It changes how the entire world sees you. After his unbelievable victory at the Wimbledon Championships, Boris Becker was no longer just a promising young tennis player. He had become a global phenomenon almost overnight. The teenage boy from a quiet town in Germany suddenly found himself standing at the center of the international spotlight. Television networks wanted interviews. Magazines placed him on their covers. Sports journalists called him the future of tennis. For Germany, Becker represented something much bigger than sports. In the mid-1980s, the country was eager for a new national hero, and Becker's fearless playing style and youthful charisma made him the perfect symbol of pride and success. But the most important thing was this. His victory at Wimbledon wasn't a lucky moment. It was only the beginning. Over the next few years, Becker proved that he wasn't just a teenage sensation, he was a dominant force in professional tennis. His aggressive serve and volley style became legendary. His powerful serves, lightning-fast reflexes, and fearless dives across the grass courts turned him into one of the most exciting players to watch. Crowds loved his intensity. Opponents feared his confidence. Throughout the late 1980s and early 1990s, Becker continued to conquer the biggest stages in tennis. He eventually won 6 Grand Slam titles, cementing his place among the sport's elite champions. Each victory made his reputation even bigger, and with each victory came something else: more fame, more influence, more money. Sponsors quickly realized that Boris Becker was more than just a tennis player. He was a brand. Major companies competed to associate their image with his success. Advertising campaigns featured his face across Europe and beyond. Endorsement deals poured in. Suddenly, Becker wasn't just earning money from tennis tournaments. He was making millions through sponsorships, commercials, and business opportunities. The lifestyle that followed looked like something from a movie. Luxury sports cars, private jets, expensive homes, exclusive parties with celebrities and business elites. Everywhere he went, cameras followed. Fans asked for autographs. Brands asked for partnerships. The media asked for more stories. To the outside world, Boris Becker's life seemed perfect. He had achieved what millions of athletes dream about: fame, wealth, and global recognition. But success has a hidden side that few people talk about. Because when fame arrives too quickly, it can slowly begin to change a person's reality. The young boy who once played tennis purely for passion was now surrounded by agents, advisors, lawyers, sponsors, and financial managers. Every decision became complicated. Every opportunity came with contracts, negotiations, and expectations. The pressure to maintain success grew heavier with each passing year. Winning was no longer just about passion for the sport. It became about protecting an empire. And inside that empire, something subtle began to shift. The attention, the wealth, and the powerful circle of people around him started to reshape the world Becker lived in. The discipline that once drove him to train relentlessly began to compete with distractions that came with celebrity life. Behind the bright lights and glamorous headlines, the foundation of his success was slowly becoming unstable. The world still saw Boris Becker the champion, but quietly, behind the scenes, the first cracks were beginning to appear. Phase 3. The crack. Warning signs. Success rarely collapses overnight. More often, the fall begins with small cracks that nobody notices at first. For years, Boris Becker had lived at the very top of the tennis world. Championships, fame, and wealth had turned him into one of the most celebrated athletes of his generation. But behind the scenes, the pressures of that success were beginning to change everything.
Professional tennis is not just physically demanding, it is emotionally exhausting. For more than a decade, Becker had lived under constant scrutiny. Every match, every decision, every moment of his life was being watched by millions. And when a person becomes a global icon, the world doesn't just celebrate their victories, it also waits for their mistakes. As Becker's career progressed through the 1990s, the spotlight surrounding his life grew even more intense. His personal life began attracting just as much attention as his performances on the court. The media followed his relationships, his lifestyle, and his decisions with relentless curiosity. Stories about his marriages, divorces, and personal controversies filled newspaper headlines across Europe. Each scandal slowly chipped away at the flawless image the world had once admired. But the real danger was happening quietly in the background, his financial world. Like many athletes who achieve massive wealth at a young age, Boris Becker entered a complicated universe of investments, business ventures, and financial advisors. Millions of dollars were coming in from tournaments, endorsements, and sponsorships. But just as quickly, millions were going out. Expensive homes, luxury lifestyles, costly divorces, failed investments. What once looked like endless wealth began to transform into financial instability. Some of the business decisions made in those years would later prove disastrous. Investments that promised large returns ended up becoming massive losses. Advisors who were supposed to protect his fortune sometimes made decisions that only increased the chaos. For a long time, the outside world couldn't see the growing problem, because when someone is famous and wealthy, the illusion of success often hides the truth. On television, Boris Becker was still the legendary Wimbledon champion who had once shocked the world at the Wimbledon Championships. But privately, the pressure was mounting. The expectations placed on him were enormous. Fans expected him to remain a champion forever. Sponsors expected him to maintain a perfect public image, and the financial responsibilities surrounding his lifestyle continued to grow. Slowly, the stability that once supported his empire began to weaken. Stress increased, financial confusion deepened, public scrutiny intensified. The same fame that once elevated him now amplified every mistake. Every rumor became a story, every controversy became a headline. And as the years passed, the gap between the image of Boris Becker the champion and the reality of Boris Becker the man became wider and wider. But the real danger had not arrived yet, because when a life built on success begins to lose its foundation, the collapse doesn't just affect reputation, it can destroy everything. And for Boris Becker, the moment of reckoning was approaching faster than anyone expected. Phase 4. The Collapse Lesson. For years, the life of Boris Becker had looked like the perfect success story, a teenage prodigy who conquered the legendary Wimbledon Championships, a global sports icon who earned millions and inspired a generation. But behind the fame, the pressure, and the financial chaos that had been quietly building for years was finally about to explode into public view. In 2017, the world heard shocking news. Boris Becker, the man who once stood at the very top of professional tennis, declared bankruptcy. For many fans, it was almost impossible to believe. How could an athlete who had earned millions through prize money, endorsements, and global fame suddenly find himself drowning in financial trouble? But the truth was more complicated than most people realized. Years of expensive lifestyles, legal battles, failed investments, and financial mismanagement had slowly drained the fortune that once seemed limitless. What had looked like an empire of success was now collapsing under the weight of debts and obligations. And the crisis didn't end there. During bankruptcy proceedings, investigators began examining Becker's financial activities more closely. Questions were raised about assets that were not properly disclosed. The legal battle grew more serious. Then came the moment that shocked the world again. In 2022,
A court in the United Kingdom convicted Boris Becker of hiding assets and loans to avoid paying debts during his bankruptcy case. The former tennis legend was sentenced to prison, marking one of the most dramatic and painful chapters in his life. For the public, the fall felt almost surreal. The same man who once dived across the grass courts of Wimbledon with fearless determination was now facing the harsh consequences of financial collapse and legal judgment. From a 17-year-old champion to a global sports superstar, and then to bankruptcy and prison. It was one of the most striking examples of how quickly life at the top can unravel. But beyond the headlines and the scandal lies a deeper lesson. Because the story of Boris Becker is not just about a tennis player who lost his fortune. It's about something far more universal. Success itself isn't dangerous. What becomes dangerous is success without balance. When fame grows faster than maturity, when wealth arrives without financial wisdom, when power replaces humility. These are the invisible forces that can slowly destroy even the brightest careers. Today, Becker has openly reflected on the mistakes that led to his downfall. In interviews and public appearances, he has spoken about the harsh lessons learned during those difficult years. For him, prison was not just a punishment, it was also a moment of reflection, a moment to confront the consequences of the choices that had shaped his life. Because sometimes the greatest victories in life don't happen on a tennis court. They happen after failure, when a person learns, rebuilds, and finds a new path forward. And in that sense, the story of Boris Becker is not only a story of collapse, it is also a reminder that even after the most dramatic fall, a person still has the power to rise again. Final message, powerful closing. Success can elevate you, but if you lose control of your values, discipline, and financial responsibility, success can also destroy you. The story of Boris Becker reminds us that winning the game is one thing, winning in life is another.